Good evening, everybody. I am Professor Gisela van Rensburg, and I'm going to present the information on the oral defense or the viva voce for doctoral students. And with me here tonight, I have Miss Elena Swanepoel, who is from the examination department or student administration, and she's going to also tell you about the final examination processes as soon as I have done my bit.
Good evening, everyone.
I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to put off my camera and share my screen. Right. So as I said, we're going to talk about the oral defense for PhD students. And I assume that we only have PhD students in the house tonight, because this only refers to PhD studies. What we are going to talk about tonight is the purpose of the oral examination, the pre-examination preparation, the oral examination itself, then some tips for how to prepare your presentation for the oral examination. Then we're going to talk about the finalization of the results and also the appeals process. So what is the purpose of the oral examination? As you know, the PhD degree is the highest degree that you can obtain. So it's on the NQF level, or the National Qualifications Framework level number 10 or level 10, and it is a requirement for obtaining the PhD degree. So it forms part of your thesis and your final examination process, and the final examination results that you are going to achieve. My apology if I struggle with my throat. Now you will hear we talk about the viva voce or the oral examination or the oral defense. All of that is the same. For students who have registered in 2023 onwards, they form the cohort that must do the oral examination. So all students who have started earlier than 2022 will not be required to do an oral examination, but those from 2022 onwards, they are going to do the oral examination. So we will have the first students this year to do the oral examination. As I've mentioned, the oral examination forms part of your final marks, and you can only obtain your degree once you have successfully completed the oral examination as well. If you are a master's student, please do not get worried now. It does not refer to master's students. So for master's students, you can relax now if there are any master's students in the house. I just want to mention before I continue, if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer section. And Mrs. Swanepoel will look at the questions while I present. And at the end of the session, if there are questions that she cannot answer during the session, she will then also just highlight to me so that we can then discuss those questions or comments that you want to make. So this is just an explanation of how the exam results work. When you submit your thesis for examination, the examiners, and there are 3 examiners, 2 national examiners and 1 international scholar. So these 3 examiners examine the thesis. They then write a report and they make a decision. So they give exam results. And there are 5 options for them to choose from. The first option is a 1.1, which is which says that the thesis is defensible and it's unamended. So it means that your thesis is of such a good standard that you need not make any corrections and you can go into the oral examination. Or there is an option, a 1.2, which is the thesis will be defensible only after you have made some minor improvements and they allow you 2 months to make these minor improvements. Then the third option is that the thesis is defensible, but only after major improvements. And for these major improvements, they allow you 4 months to complete. Then there are the unfortunate decisions, which is the 1.4 or the fourth decision, where they refer the thesis back for revision and they request that you resubmit for examination. In other words, the corrections are major, but to such an extent that they, as examiners, want to see it again and examine it again before they make a decision whether this thesis is defensible. So that means that you will have to re-register again, you will have to make your corrections, you will have to submit an intent to submit letter, and you have to submit the thesis, the written part, for re-examination. And then the fifth decision is the very unfortunate decision where they reject the study and they say this study is not defensible. So what they are saying with that decision is that even though one could make corrections, it would not be possible to make corrections to such a level that they can pass, that you can pass the thesis. So that is the very unfortunate decision, but we don't want to go that route. We want to believe that the outcome is one of the first 3 outcomes. So the general rules in terms of the oral examination is that it will be conducted only if the examiners recommended that the thesis is defensible. In other words, if they chose either without any corrections, with minor corrections, or with major corrections, but under the supervision of the university or your supervisor. The language for the oral examination will be in English, except for those studies that are conducted in a language other than English. So if it's a language that if it's a study that is done in, say, Setswana, then the oral examination will also be in that language. The examination will take place through virtual meeting platforms, so it will either be Teams or Zoom or any other virtual platform that is decided upon, or if there is a case where it's not possible to do the virtual examination, then with the agreement of all members involved, it might be face-to-face, but that will only be in exceptional cases. Another very important general rule is that the oral examination is an academically or a scientific process, and it must be conducted in an academic, appropriate and professional manner with respect, with courtesy and academic integrity. This is a part of the examination process and it is a formal process. So all these formal processes must be adhered to. In terms of the deliberations that will take place, and I will show you in a minute what the committee consists of, but in terms of the deliberations that are going to take place, they will all be confidential. No information will be made available during the meeting or during the process of the oral examination, and it will all be treated as an examination. As I mentioned, it's online, and in exceptional cases it can be face-to-face, but should it happen that it is face-to-face, then the student is responsible for his or her own expenses regarding travel and accommodation. So please take note, if you as a student prefer to do it face-to-face, and they do allow it because of exceptional cases or exceptional circumstances, then the expenses will be to your own costs. The examination committee must form a quorum. In other words, there must be at least 2 examiners, preferably all 3 examiners, because they are the people that are the decision makers, or the only ones that have decision-making powers. So one would prefer that all three of the examinations are present. Should it happen that an examiner cannot attend the oral examination, they may send a question or questions to the non-examining chairperson if they need clarity on specific issues of the study. So just to explain what the committee is going to look like, if you sit in front of or if you log in and you see there are a number of people in the committee, just be aware of who will be there. So there will be a representative from the College of Human Sciences or the College of Economic and Management Sciences, or whichever college you are registered for, and that is usually the director of the school or or a representative of the college. Then from the department, there will be either one or two members from the department. So it might be the chair of the department and the higher degrees committee chairperson, or the M&D coordinator. You might know of the M&D coordinator in the department. So it might be both of them or one of them. Then the non-examining chair person, and this person is the person who coordinates the whole examination process in the department. And you will see, I will talk about the non-examining chairperson's role just in a minute. But this person oversees the process. The non-examining chairperson communicates with the examiners. He or she communicates with the supervisor. So that person will also be present, but will not have decision-making powers, but will facilitate the processes and will collate the reports and communicate with you as a student on what is going to happen in the oral examination as well. Then your supervisor or your supervisors will also be present. They will really only be observers in this process, and they will not have any decision-making powers. So they will not be able to fend for you or to answer on your behalf or to support certain questions that they might ask and you might not be able to answer. So the supervisor is just an observer. Then you have the three examiners who have the full decision-making power. So between the three examiners, they are going to decide whether you pass the oral examination, whether there are more corrections that you need to make, be it minor or be it major, or in the unfortunate case, they might even decide that you do not pass the oral examination and cannot pass the examination. The examination of your thesis. So they are the only three people who have the decision-making powers. So in order to reach a quorum, there will be at least 5 members that I've listed here, but at least 5 of them will be present in the oral examination. Now, the non-examining chairperson, who is now the person who oversees the examination process from the start right to the end, will contact you as the candidate to explain to you what is required of you in the oral examination, and will give you some guidelines on how to prepare for the oral examination. He or she will give you guidelines on the presentation that you have to prepare, and what the content is, how long the presentation is going to be. So this non-examining chairperson will explain to you exactly what's going to be required of you. If you are an international student and there are problems with connection or maybe a time differences or whatever the logistical problems may be, you communicate that with the non-examining chairperson. So your communication is going to be through this person. You will also involve your supervisor so that your supervisor is also aware of any problems that might or possibly arise during the oral examination. So should there be problems with connection, with a location from where you can do the oral examination, from the university side, there will be support in arranging a venue, a suitable venue for you to do the oral examination. So it could be a university that is in close proximity to you, or it could be an embassy, a South African embassy, or a consulate, or any office of the South African government, or any university that will be willing to make some venue or space available for you for the oral examination. So that can be arranged should there be problems with connection, should there be problems with a venue, because it must be a conducive and a suitable venue for you to engage in a scientific manner and engage in a conducive manner with the committee. It must be an environment that will not be maybe your office where someone might barge in, or phones might ring, or whatever the case may be. If you do not have a conducive environment, in those instances, one can arrange for a better venue for you. So this person, the NEC, will also arrange the time and the date for this oral examination, and then also the link that you will receive to connect to the university during the examination process. The corrected thesis, remember now you have received results from the examiners. Let's call it the theoretical reports and results you've received, and you've made your corrections, and you have submitted your corrected thesis to your supervisor. Your supervisor will submit this corrected thesis to the non-examining chairperson, and the non-examining chairperson will then distribute the thesis with all three the copies of the examiner's reports to each of the examiners 2 weeks before the date of the oral examination. So the examiners will then have an opportunity to look at your corrections, look at whether they are satisfied with what you have changed and corrected, and will also then read the exam reports of the other 2 examiners. And based on what they then decide, they will then prepare themselves for the oral examination, and they will prepare some questions that they're going to ask you. So they're going to use this revised, improved thesis to prepare for the oral examination. The non-examining chairperson will also send the student procedures to you with all the information that you need in order to prepare for this oral examination. And one of the requirements is that you prepare a PowerPoint presentation that must be presented during the oral examination. And this PowerPoint presentation will have to be prepared well in advance, because as student you will prepare the presentation, you will communicate with your supervisor, you will finalize the presentation with your supervisor. Your supervisor will then send the presentation to the non-examining chairperson, and the non-examining chairperson will send this presentation to the examiners a week before the oral examination. So then they have your thesis, they have the exam reports of all 3 of the examiners, and they also have your PowerPoint presentation, so they can really prepare well, and they can also look at your presentation and see whether you really understand what is the essence of your study, and are you going to communicate the essence of your study during the oral examination. So you will hear when I explain all these processes that the preparation for the oral examination must really be done as best as possible, and you cannot only rely on what you are going to say on that day at the oral examination, because the examiners already have the improved thesis, and they also have your presentation. So make sure that when you prepare this presentation, that it is a professionally prepared presentation, that it contains the important information for you to use when you present your thesis. The non-examining chairperson will also facilitate a question and answer session, and this session might last between 30 and 45 minutes. So the 3 examiners will have an opportunity to ask questions, and we will look at the type of questions that they can ask you, but they will have an opportunity to ask questions. Now, the questions are not only going to focus on what you say in the oral examination, it is also going to focus on information that comes from the thesis and maybe relates to the improvements and the corrections that you have made. Ms. Swanepoel, are there any questions so far that you want me to answer before I continue?
Gisela, no, there was only one from Kiribone, and it had to do with what interventions does the university have if a student obtain a 1.5 result. And I've answered to say that with a 1.5, it's an outright fail. And unfortunately, there are no further interventions from the university side, and it's therefore critical that students make use of all the available research and training opportunities, and to really listen to the advice of the supervisor. We sometimes see reports where it's clear that students do not take advice from the supervisor who's an expert in that area. So that is really a critical part. Thank you, Prof. Gisela.
Thank you very much for that. It's a very comprehensive answer. What I also like to add here is when you are ready to submit, you will be required to complete the intent to submit form. So you submit the form to your supervisor, saying that I am ready, I want to submit. And your supervisor must sign that form and give permission that you may submit. If the supervisor has signed, it also goes to the chair of the department, who also then approves the intent to submit. And then it goes to the exam department, where they generate a form which we use to appoint the examiners. Now, in some cases, it does happen that students insist on submitting and insist on submitting against the will of the supervisor. And this is where we really want to guard you against being hard-headed and insisting on submitting. If your supervisor says to you, you are not really ready to submit, your thesis needs some more editing, or the final chapter needs more explanation, more elaboration, please listen to your supervisor. Your supervisor will always make that decision in your best interest. As supervisors, we have the experience of also examining other universities' theses. So we have a very good idea of how one reads it as an examiner. It is true that if you are a supervisor of a study, you become so involved in that study that you also sometimes miss mistakes, you miss some shortcomings. And when the supervisor reads that final thesis before it is submitted, one reads it with a different eye. You read it with a more critical eye and more from the stance of an examiner. So then you might pick up errors, and we do find that students say, but now you come with this change, now you want me to change this and that, and you did not say anything 2 months ago. Please bear with your supervisor. It does happen because one puts on a different hat when you read the final thesis. Now, in some cases, there are students that submit without the permission of the supervisor, and it goes through the examination process, and then it can really end very bad. Now, there are 3 examiners, and all 3 of them must make a decision. And you might find a case where one examiner gives a 1.2, in other words, minor corrections. Another examiner could give a 1.3, which says major corrections, and then the one says 1.5. And we've had a case like this earlier this year where there were 2 1.2s, in other words, 2 examiners who indicated that it's minor corrections, and one examiner that indicated it's a 1.5. Now, you might say, but this doesn't sound right, and the one who gave the 1.5 was not fair or had another reason why they failed the student, and it's not based on the quality, but the examiners might also miss certain issues. The examiner in this case that I've mentioned now, the examiner who gave the 1.5, picked up serious ethical principles, ethical issues, which the other examiners did not pick up. And because there's nothing you can do to those ethical issues, because the data has been collected, the ethical transgression has taken place. That is why that examiner indicated that the student cannot pass because you cannot improve this thesis now. It's too late. It's after the effect. But then a non-unanimous, in other words, 2 said the student passed and 1 said the student failed. So that is a non-unanimous result. If there is a non-unanimous result, those results are discussed by an exam committee. So they look at all the reports. They look at the 3 examiners' reports. They look at the supervisor's non-evaluative report, because every supervisor must write a report once the student has submitted. They cannot evaluate the thesis, so they write the non-evaluative report, where they explain the journey that they've gone through with you as a student, how you've worked as a student. Were you an independent researcher? Were you able to grasp the methodology well? Were you able to consult recent and relevant sources at all times? Were you able to identify the leaders in the field that you are doing your research in? So the non-evaluative report also gives an idea of how you as a researcher went through this process of conducting the research. And then the non-examining chairperson also writes a report. The non-examining chairperson's report is based on the 3 examination reports and the supervisor's report. So there again is a comprehensive report that looks at those 4 reports. So when this result goes to the examination committee, they have 4 reports. They have the 3 examiners' reports. No, actually, they have 5 reports. They have the 3 examiners' reports, they have the non-examining chairperson's report, and they have the supervisor's report. So they have 5 reports, and then they look at all those reports, and they make a recommendation on what the outcome should be. So they might recommend, yes, this thesis cannot be corrected, so it will be a 1.5, which is very unfortunate because then you fail your PhD. Or they say, this could be changed to a 1.4. You don't necessarily, or you don't go with the majority rule. So it does not mean because 2 examiners passed the thesis and 1 examiner failed the thesis, that one goes with the majority rule. That does not work that way. It depends on what the problems are. It depends on whether this thesis is correctable, be it through a resubmission or be it through major revisions. So the college committee might recommend that this study where there was a 1.5 and 2 1.2s, they might recommend that the final decision may be a 1.4, and the 1.4 means that the student must make major corrections and resubmit for examination. And then when the college has made that recommendation, it goes to the vice principal research, and the vice principal of research will then make the decision whether this study will fail or whether this study can be saved through either major corrections and a resubmission for examination, or major corrections under the supervision of the supervisor. So there are many processes in place. It's not just merely the decision of the examiner, and that's where it ends, and that's where you either survive or you don't survive this journey. So there are so many levels of involvement in making the final decision, especially if it is a non-unanimous decision between the examiners. I want you to just feel safe that when you submit your examination, your thesis for examination, and you know that you have done the best you could, this thesis is as good as it gets, you have adhered to the criteria of the university and the specific criteria that your department or your college has set for what the thesis should entail and the format of the thesis. If you know that you have done all you could and you have listen to your supervisor in terms of whether it is ready for submission or not, then you must know that it's really in exceptional cases where a student will fail, but it does happen, and it is all about quality. It is all about the National Qualifications Framework and the NQF level that it has to adhere to, and it must adhere to those national standards and international requirements for a PhD study. So this is just a mouthful of in terms of the results, but I just wanted to just add to what Mrs. Swanepoel has said about the 1.5. I just want to take a sip of water. Right, so once the oral examination has taken place, the non-examining chairperson will immediately contact you and the supervisor directly after the deliberations to inform you of the unofficial results. So you will not be left aside for weeks and months before you know the outcome of the oral examination. They will give you a heads up. Yes, you have passed, or there is a consensus decision on the oral examination, and you will then soon receive the reports and the outcome. But they will give you the unofficial results directly after the oral examination. The examiners will write further reports. Remember, they wrote reports on the written examination process when they examined the thesis. They will write a second report, and these reports will then be submitted to the non-examining chairperson, who will anonymize the reports and send these reports to the supervisor, who will then again communicate with you. So if there are any corrections that you have to make, the supervisor will then give you those reports, and you will make the corrections again. Then this last or the oral exam report will be a consolidated report that will give you guidance on how to make corrections, and it will also indicate how much time you have to make the corrections and by when they would want the corrected thesis. You will work the same way as in the first phase of the examination process. You will make the corrections. You will draw up a table or write a report on the corrections that were made and indicate where in the thesis the corrections were made. And then the final thesis will then also go to your examiner. Once your supervisor, once your supervisor is satisfied with the corrections, he or she will then write to the non-examining chairperson and confirm that the corrections have been made. And then the final recommendations or in a report will be submitted, and the outcome of the examination will then be communicated. So what support will you receive as a student? The non-examining chairperson is going to give you information. They will give you a letter with all the requirements. The letter will indicate the process. It will indicate the time of the examination. It will give you detail on what you have to prepare and how you have to prepare in terms of the venue, in terms of your ability to communicate online. In other words, your device must have a working camera. It will be recorded, so at the beginning of the session, they will also indicate to you that it will be recorded. So all this information will be provided to you, and then the information letter also indicates what the PowerPoint presentation or the slideshow should look like. So it will really have your first page, first slide will obviously be your title slide with your the study title and with your personal information. Then you will give information on the introduction and the background of the study. You will explain the problem statement. Why did you decide to do the study? What was the gap in the literature? What was the situation that was in need of change? Why was this study researchable and feasible? So you have to justify why you did the study. Then you will also indicate what the purpose and the objectives or the research questions were for the study. You will discuss the methods and the materials. Who was the population? What sampling technique did you use? What was the sampling, the research setting? Where was this study conducted? Specific characteristics of the research site, the data collection techniques, the instruments that you used. How did you analyze the data and how did you present the findings and the results? What kind of statistics did you use? Or if it was a qualitative study, what was the data analysis technique that you used? So all these methods are important. If it's, for example, a mixed method study, and I know many of the PhD students conduct mixed methods research, it's important that you also indicate how you integrated the data, how you justify this design, that it is a mixed method study, and that the unique characteristics of a mixed method study of integrating the findings into one set of data, how that was done, and what the importance was of, or the reasons was, to do, for example, a mixed method study, and was it done by explanatory or exploratory mixed methods research? Was it a sequential design? So all those important aspects in terms of the design, you will also explain in your presentation. And it might sound like a lot of information, but if you are conversant in what you have done, if you are informed of your own methods and materials that you've used, you will be able to do this in a 30-minute slideshow. You will be able to, in a few sentences, say, this was an exploratory sequential mixed methods design, and the reason why I used it was this and that. And, so you must really be confident in explaining the processes, in explaining the methods, talking about the findings, the main findings, and the conclusions, the important conclusions that were drawn. Then you will also be asked to include the engagement with the amendments done after the examination of the written thesis. In other words, based on the comments and the feedback of the examiners during the first round of examination, what were the corrections, what were the changes you had to make? So you will highlight those important changes that were made. They might say that the research setting was not clearly defined, or it was not clear who collected the data, whether you've used field workers to collect the data, and what your role was as the primary researcher in data collection if you use field workers. Those are the important aspects that you will have to include in your presentation so that you clearly show your role as researcher as well. Then of importance for a PhD study, of course, is the original contribution or the unique contribution. You will often hear that we talk about the unique contribution that a study must make, a PhD study must make. How do they contribute to the body of knowledge? What are the implications for practice? What are the implications for policy? What are the implications for further research or for education, or the implications of your study? And then also what further research is needed to explore this phenomenon. We all want to believe that our studies give answers to many problems, but often research stimulates so many more questions that that you ask yourself, but I've done this research and now there are so many further questions and further research that could be recommended. But this is important and it's good because it shows that you are looking at the bigger picture. You are looking at the existing body of knowledge and the existing scientific body that is available, and how your study then fits into that existing body of knowledge, but also stimulates more questions and further research. In terms of the presentation, I mentioned that it must be sent to the supervisor before the viva voce or the oral examination, and you will work with your supervisor who will have a supportive role in terms of the oral examination. The supervisor will assist you in finalizing the presentation, in preparing you for the presentation, improving the slideshow. So you can have a mock presentation, for example, where you and your supervisor engage in such a presentation as if it is an oral examination, and the supervisor can then ask questions, be devil's advocate, ask different questions, and see whether you, as the student, will be able to answer questions on your thesis, and whether your presentation is clear and your presentation is done in a professional manner, and also your presentation skills are of a professional at a professional level, and that you will maintain the scientific integrity during your examination. Your supervisor will be at the oral examination, but as I mentioned, they will not say anything during the examination unless the examiners request some clarity or information from them. They might, before they start with the with the questioning of the student or the candidate. They might ask some clarification questions, or even before they finalize their decision, they might ask a question of the supervisor if their question was not answered during the oral examination, or if there is something that is still not clear. But the supervisor will not engage in any of the deliberations to finalize the results of the oral examination. These deliberations to finalize the results will only be between the 3 examiners. It will not be between the examiners and any other members of the committee. The other members are observers. They facilitate the processes, they chair the processes, but the examiners will be the only ones who ask the questions. Your supervisor will then also provide the non-examining chairperson with your corrected thesis within 3 months of receiving the final report of the non-examining chairperson. In other words, after your oral examination and your corrections, that thesis, the final thesis, corrected thesis, must go to the non-examining chairperson within 3 months of the examination, the final report of the non-examining chairperson. Your supervisor will also ensure that the recommended amendments to the thesis have been attended to and submitted to the non-examining chairperson by the due date. So it is important that this second phase is also following the same processes. You receive the corrections, you make the corrections, you write a written report or tabulate your corrections, you submit that to your supervisor, and the supervisor then has to submit that to the non-examining chairperson. It will be a second written report from the supervisor that it declares that the student has made all the amendments. Right, so what are your responsibilities as the doctoral candidate? Now, you have to present yourself for the oral examination within 1 year of the date of attending to the report by the non-examining chairperson. Now, this might sound very long, and you might think, but how is that possible? Because when you get your results, say, for example, in January, and they say you must make major corrections, so you have 4 months to make your corrections. You might now say, but why do we now talk about 1 year? Unfortunately, we do find that students feel so disillusioned when they get the corrections that they just don't attend to the corrections. Sometimes they, in their heads and in their minds, they have now finalized their study, they have completed their study because they have submitted the thesis for the first round of examination. And now suddenly the results come back and they say, you must make major corrections. But you have now moved on, and you don't have time to work on it now. You used all your leave, and or you moved from one job to the other, and you do not attend to your corrections. You must make these corrections, and the oral examination must take place within 1 year of the period that the results were, or the report was sent by the non-examining chairperson. And it also often means, or sometimes means, that you have to re-register, and I think Mrs. Swanepoel will talk to you about those administrative issues that you will have to adhere to. As a doctoral candidate, you must also ensure that you have the right online equipment, and that is available on that day. Do not use your cell phone for an oral examination. You will not succeed in managing everything. It is a stressful situation for any student, for any person to do an oral examination. And if you're now on your phone and you have to share your slideshow, please use a computer. or a device that has a working camera, that has a working microphone, that you know very well, that you know how to share your slideshow, that you keep your camera on all the time. You take into consideration what does the background look like? Are you sitting in your bedroom on your bed doing the oral examination? Please do not do that. It is a scientific and a professional session. It's a formal session, so make sure that your environment is a conducive environment. I want to even say a formal environment. In other words, look at your background, use a background like we did. We've got the UNISA background. If you are sitting somewhere where they might see a very untidy room behind you, or if it's in a place where there is potentially noise, make sure that you do not sit next to a window where your gardener is going to mow the lawn the moment you start with the oral examination, or there are renovations going on in your house and now you do your oral examination while they are hammering and working on your environment. So make sure that your environment is conducive and that there is no noise during the examination. You will also prepare yourself well. You will obviously have your presentation, but also have an electronic copy of the thesis with the correct page numbers that are identical to the copies that were submitted for examination. So you've made your corrections. Your submitted thesis that you are now going to send to your supervisor will be sent to the examiners. Make sure that you have the version with the same pages. It must be the identical version, because the examiners might refer you to a page and say, on page 25 you say this. Explain yourself. So have that at hand and ready for reference purposes. And know where to find the information in your thesis should they ask questions. They might indicate that they did not see anything related to the validity of the instrument. Make sure that you know where it is, or more or less where in the thesis it is. You will not remember the exact page numbers, but that you more or less know where in the thesis the information is. Know the most significant results in the thesis. You have to actually sell your study. You have to sound convinced and convincing when you discuss your study, when you answer questions. If they, for example, ask you, but what are the most significant results? How will it inform practice? Why is this research at the level of a doctoral study? Know those results, know what to answer them when they ask you these kind of questions. So prepare for the oral examination and have notes on new developments relating to the study that would have come to their attention since the completion of the study where applicable. Remember, you might submit in November. It goes for examination, say, for example, towards the middle of December. The examiners examine in January, February. They ask you to make major corrections, which takes you 4 months. But in the meantime, Mrs. Swanepoel and I and Ms. Dube and all of us, we have also conducted a similar study, and we publish on this topic, or something happens in practice. COVID starts again and it changes certain things. There are new developments in terms of the vaccination for COVID, or whatever the case may be. Be aware of the latest developments that relate to your topic and relate to your study, because you have become one of the experts in this field. And it does not mean once you've submitted that thesis, your information is now the best evidence and your information is now the latest developments. A lot can happen. We all know that science is dynamic. A lot can happen. So know about the new developments, know about the experts in the field who have now published more information on climate change and the latest developments around the topic, so that if they ask you questions or if they ask you to contextualize your findings into the latest developments and the latest information or the latest concerns that arose related to your topic, that you are able to at least talk to that. You might not have all the finer detail of that, and that is okay, but it must just show that you are still on top of it. You are still well aware of what the latest developments are in terms of your topic. Okay, so I mentioned that you should have a dummy run or a practice session with your supervisor. It is important that you rehearse your presentation, that you make sure that your presentation is scientifically correct, that there aren't spelling errors, that there aren't formatting errors, that it contains all the information that is important, and that it is finally edited before your supervisor submits it to the non-examining chairperson. Also practice the sharing of the slideshow. We so often see that people are not able to share. They're not able to unmute themselves. It might sound ridiculous, but people who do not engage in, for example, or use Teams, and they prefer to use Zoom or the other way around, they might not be familiar with how to share their slides or how to unmute themselves or keep their camera open or manage the presentation. So practice that session through a rehearsal session with your supervisor. Now, if you think of the 30 minutes that you are allowed, you also need to take into consideration, do you talk fast? Do you talk slow? Do you take breaths in between and maybe more silences than other people? We all present differently. We all speak differently. We speak at a different speed with different moments of silence. So work that out for yourself. But if you think of the 30 minutes, you should have an absolute maximum of 30 slides. That means 1 minute per slide. And that is quite fast. So take all these aspects into consideration when you prepare your slideshow. So you will see we give some guidance on, and this is not hard and fast, but we give some guidance, and based on the largest number. So if we say 2 to 3 slides, we use the 3 and we got to 30 slides. But looking at the introduction and background, you can or could have 2 to 3 slides. Your problem statement could be 2 to 3 slides, but between the introduction, the background, and the statement of the problem, you can play around in terms of the number of slides. You can even take away some of these slides maybe to the methods or the conclusions, depending on where you want to focus your discussion. Then you will have a slide that gives the purpose statement and the objectives or the research questions. And then very important section would be your methods and your materials, which could be 5 to 6 slides, or you can maybe take some from the problem statement and add another one, or play around with a number of slides. And your results and your findings will have a large number of slides, because here you will also have to justify why this study does make a unique contribution, or show the findings that shows that this study makes a unique contribution. So the results and the findings will require quite a number of slides. Then you will have to draw your conclusions, indicate what the implications of the study is, and also what the recommendations are for further research. Your recommendations may be for policy, your recommendations may be for any other practice changes or improvements. So you will then suggest those recommendations as well. And then very important is that you show what the unique contribution of the study is. With a PhD study, it must be very clear. You must not try to convince the examiners at this level that there is a unique contribution. This unique contribution must be clear in your thesis. They must have seen that unique contribution during the first round or the theoretical examination phase, and clearly see what you have, what this study has contributed to the scientific body of knowledge, how this study is contextualized into the existing body of knowledge. So it is very important that you have this clear understanding and explanation of what the contribution is. Mrs. Swanepoel, any questions that I have to attend to before I continue?
Maybe just for the sake of the colleagues, maybe they didn't read. The question was, can examiners ask questions outside of what has been presented? My answer was that they can ask questions on any aspect of the thesis that was submitted. And the recommendation is that they keep a copy of the original submitted thesis as well as the corrected version, because the examiners will have the original thesis and they could refer the candidate to a page number or a paragraph. So if you only have your corrected version, you will talk to the wrong paragraph or the wrong page. So that was just one. And then Kenny Borney, in the case of resubmission, will the examiners be the same? We really try our best that it must be the same examiners. Unfortunately, life happens, and we did have a case where an examiner passed away, and then there's no other option as to appoint another examiner. Then we had Anonymous that asked, good evening. Are you allowed to read from the copy of your thesis to the examiner? I said, you can refer to the particular paragraph, but it will be expected of you to show that you know what is in your thesis. So reading would not give them that impression. Prof. Gisela, I don't know if you agree with me. I don't think it will be a good thing to just read from it. And then Anonymous asked, just for interest sake, what happened to a promoter, or we call them supervisors, if the outcome is a 1.5, and if the student followed all the instructions, recommendations, including the supervisor indicating that you can submit for examination. I just indicated that our supervisors undergo compulsory training as part of their development. We will not give a student a novice supervisor. If there is a novice supervisor, there's always a main supervisor that is a expert in the area. If the reports come through and there are discrepancies, the supervisor and the student will work through these reports, and should there really be serious discrepancies, then the supervisor can take that to the NEC, and also there is an appeal for a student to appeal the decision from when there's an outcome. And then there is the question, Gisela, and I think here you can maybe add some if I give you my answer. The question was, what causes a thesis to be rejected or deemed indefensible at that level, and who is to blame, student or supervisors? What approach should be followed along with the journey to avoid that situation? Based on the statistics, what is the most common reason for rejection at UNISA? Where we find that where examiners would identify plagiarism, or during the viva voce, it becomes clear to the examiners that it's not the student's own work. That could happen. And when a student show that they have limited insight into the research that they've done. Important is to give attention to the title of the research to ensure that your research reflects the title of what is being researched. And I think sometimes it really happens that examiners will say that the title doesn't really speak to what is the research. So discuss these things with your supervisor before making that final intention to submit. I think that is important. Use Turnitin. Make sure that there are no plagiarism at all. Use your own words. Avoid the use of AI to write your thesis for you. And Gisela, I don't know if there's any other answers that you would like to add to that question.
I think you've answered them very well. I will just quickly, I made some notes, so I will just quickly also add, you might have said that, but I'll just maybe reiterate then. About the re-examination, yes, we try our best to use the same examiners. Only the examiner who has failed the student will re-examine. So if two examiners have given a 1.1 and a 1.2 and a 1.3, and one examiner has given a 1.4, and the decision is that the student must resubmit, so they go with the decision of the 1.4, only the examiner who has given the 1.4 will re-examine that thesis. The other two who have passed the thesis will not re-examine. Then, in terms of reading from the copy, you must be familiar with your study. So they will never ask you to give an explanation that will require you to read something. Remember, your camera is on, so they will look at how knowledgeable you are, or how confident, that's the word I was looking for, how confident you are in answering the questions. Do you have to go to your thesis every time to go and find the answers and not being able to answer? If to go back to the field workers, for example, if they ask you, but how do you know that the field workers actually were capable of collecting the data? Now you go and page quickly and look at how many field workers did you use, and did you train them before the time, or what are the reasons for using the field workers? So that shows that you do not know and understand your own study. It also could be, and unfortunately it has happened, that we have students who have ghost writers for their thesis. It has happened a couple of years back in the university, where it was really not expected at all. The department was so impressed with the study, and they invited the candidate. It was a very important person, very important person, highly regarded person. They invited the person to attend a departmental research day or seminar and present on their study, and then they realized, but the student does not understand or know anything about the study, and they found out that this person's personal assistant or one of their staff members actually did the research. So in exceptional cases, it can identify a ghost student, or a student with a ghost writer. So the way in which they ask the questions in the oral examination are not of such a nature that you have to read sections from your thesis. But you have the thesis there. If you, for example, struggle to answer a question, the examiner might say, but in your original version of your thesis, or in the corrected thesis on page so-and-so, line so-and-so, you said this. Please explain that. And you may then go to that section, should it be necessary, to just look at what you've written. Maybe it was an error, maybe you accidentally wrote quantitative instead of qualitative, or whatever. Then in that case, you can look at the thesis. That is why they indicate that you must have the thesis with the correct lines numbering and page numbering, so that you are able to refer back to that. In terms of the supervisor, when there's a 1.5, I think Mrs. Swanepoel has really mentioned all the important aspects, and that is that supervisors undergo continuous training. We are currently busy with a supervisor training a program that also runs over a couple of months, and supervisors in their hundreds attend those sessions year after year. There are so many training sessions that they attend on a continuous basis. So it is not a matter of you are an experienced supervisor, you have completed 20 students, now you do not need to attend any other seminars or any other training sessions. We continuously attend sessions. If it's a 1.5, it will be important to have a discussion with a supervisor as well. One should not put the blame on either the student or the supervisor unless there is a very specific reason for that. And I mentioned the reason of students who might submit without the permission of the supervisor, or there may be cases where a supervisor really did not attend to the final thesis and pick up obvious errors. But what you also must keep in mind is that we all see research differently. We all have different schools of thought or come from different schools of thought. So there might be situations where the supervisor and the student were convinced that the sampling procedure was in order, where the one examiner might not pick up the errors or the ethical issues related to the sampling of say, for example, a vulnerable group. They might not see the participants as a vulnerable group, whereas the examiner, one of the examiners might say, but this is a vulnerable group. And it has caused ethical issues, and that is why there are major issues with the methodology. So there are different schools of thought, there are different views on what is acceptable and what is not. So it can happen that although the supervisor could be a very experienced supervisor, and also a supervisor who has really engaged in the final thesis extensively, and the student has engaged extensively, it can still happen. But if there is any situation where the supervisor needs support, the supervisor will get support. If there was really neglect or really a problem on the side of the university, it will be taken into consideration with the final decision as well. But these are really exceptional cases. And I don't want us to focus on the 1.5 because they are, and I think Mrs. Swanepoel can give us better statistics than that, but there are really very few that end up in a 1.5. They are really the exception. So let's not focus on that, rather focus on a defensible thesis. If they say a thesis is indefensible, the cases that I've seen all had to do with methodology and ethical considerations. Those are, and obviously then plagiarism. Yes, if the plagiarism is high, if the use of AI is high, they pick it up. You have to submit your Turnitin report as well. They can request for a new report as well if they're not convinced that the report, sometimes people exclude certain things, and then the report seems much more favorable than what it actually is. So sometimes they manipulate the reports. The Turnitin report can also give you a good idea of the similarity of your ability as a student to paraphrase, to use sources scientifically correct and ethically correct, and then the outright plagiarism obviously as well. Or if there is no unique contribution in a PhD study, if it was just an explorative study and it just really discusses very basic information, and it does not make a contribution to the scientific body of knowledge. That could also then be a case of a 1.5, which I have seen where the examiners indicated that this is actually only at the level of a master's study, because the NQF levels also have criteria. They have specific standards that one must adhere to. If it's NQF level 10, there are specific criteria that must be criteria that must be reached with the PhD. Elena, you also mentioned something about the title and the purpose of the study. You will often hear us talk about the golden thread that must run through your study. So if you take your title, you take your problem, you take your purpose statement and your objectives, they must align. And then your methods must also address those objectives. And so that golden thread must run through the study. The one chapter must flow from the one to the other. That congruence must be there. That is very important to also show the examiners that you as a student or as a researcher were able to follow a logical process and a logical decision when you chose the design, when you made the recommendations, when you highlighted the originality or the unique contribution that the study has made, and also when you have identified limitations of the study. Often students think that if they identify limitations, then their study is flawed. It really is not the case. There might be limitations because no study is 100% complete. There are always certain limitations. As long as these limitations did not affect this scientific rigor of the study. So yes, that is just in terms of limitations. Right. Okay, so yes.
Sorry, a few more questions came through. They see that the presentation that the student will do is 30 minutes. How much time do they have to ask questions? It's between 30 and 45 minutes. Yes. And then the other question was, is this oral exam where students are also invited, or it's a different setting, the colloquium? Some colleges do colloquiums in order to prepare students for the Viva Voce. The Viva Voce is an official examination process. Only the examination committee that Prof. Gisela has indicated earlier will be at your oral exam. With the colloquium, on the other hand, colleges tend to invite people from industry that can help and guide you. So there's a clear difference between the two. The colloquium is friends and family most probably can come, and people from the department, but not with the Viva Voce, an official exam. Will the student know if the examiners have passed him or her before the Viva? The answer here is no. The official result will only be communicated after the Viva Voce. So you can't say because it says it's defensible, it's accepted. It's only after the Viva has taken place that you can do that. And then there are 3 questions that came through that I have not attended to. Gisela, do you still have more slides?
Yes, I have a couple more.
100%, then I will answer the others and we can go through them when you are done. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes, indeed, the departments and the colleges are now planning on quite interesting preparations and training sessions for students, those rehearsal sessions, for example, that you and your supervisor will engage in. Your supervisor can, for example, invite the rest of the department or the rest of their students, or it can be a departmental decision of how you can rehearse your and prepare for your presentation. In some countries, they do invite an audience. I was an examiner now for a study in Cameroon, and they had a whole audience that were present when the candidate had to do the oral examination. So it depends, but at UNISA it is only the exam committee that will be present during the formal examination process. So when you present, you have an opportunity to present the research in simple and straightforward terms. You do not have to be highfalutin and try to memorize very highfalutin statements. You're going to sell your research. You must own the research. It's your achievement. Tell the examiners about the research. So show them your confidence in terms of the research, and it must be understandable to non-specialists as well. So that shows that you are able to describe how one does sampling or how one analyzes the statistics. So it's important that you own this research, that you are confident when you present the research. If there are questions from the other panel members of the exam committee, it will be after the presentation, but it will just be maybe for clarity's sake, or the examiners might want to ask something. But in the end, those questions must then be asked before the examiners start with their questions. Once you have done your presentation and the questions have been asked, you will leave the meeting, but you must stay present in wherever you are. You will leave the meeting so that the examiners can deliberate. They go into a separate room, the three of them, and they will then deliberate and make a decision. They will always agree on the decision. It will be a unanimous decision, either that you must make more corrections, maybe minor, maybe major, maybe you, in the exceptional cases, the student can fail. It could have been defensible in the first round, but after the oral, the student could fail. So that would also be the exception, hopefully. But then they will call you back into the session, and they will close the examination session, and the non-examining chairperson will directly after the session give you the non-official results, and will maybe say to you there are a few minor corrections that you still have to make. Then you follow the same procedures and provide the table with the corrections and the corrected final thesis. Okay, so we've spoken about the examiners, that they are going to ask the questions, they make the decisions. They must also be prepared. They must look at all three the reports before they come to the examination. They must look at the corrections that you've made after the first round. So they will have the original thesis, but they will also have the improved thesis. So they will, when they ask specific questions based on the thesis, they will clearly indicate which thesis they are referring to when they refer to a page or a paragraph or a line. And then their final report after the oral examination must reach the non-examining chair within 1 week of the oral examination. So after the oral examination, things happen quite fast, and the results won't take that long, depending on how long it takes the student to make any further corrections. When it comes to the questions, the type of questions that they can ask you any questions related to the process, in other words, related to the methodology. They can ask any questions related to the content, so the topic and the field related to the study, and then also personal questions in terms of what your role was during the examination. And we often see with examination results or reports that examiners ask the question, but what was the role of the student? Because the student used field workers to collect the data. How did the student ensure data quality? How did the student ensure that the ethical principles were adhered to? How did the students ensure that, or the field workers ensure that or the student ensure that the field workers conducted the interviews correctly, and all those kind of questions. So they might ask you, but what was your role in that? How are you sure that your data is valid and reliable or trustworthy? So they might ask you those kind of questions as well. So they might ask questions on anything related to the study, to the missing references, incomplete discussions or analysis, areas that may require more detailed discussion. You might not have explained something clearly, so they might ask you questions about that. They might ask you questions related to the literature, the latest literature, or maybe some literature that you did not include at all. We had an interesting case the other day where the examiner criticized the student quite harshly, because this examiner is also an expert in that field, but the student only referred to that particular examiner once, and then the examiner queried that. But again, this could be something that the supervisor and the student will look at and make a decision whether that comment is actually a valid comment. Because when you look at the comments, there might be comments that you do not, or the supervisor does not agree with. And when you then compile that table with the corrections, you will indicate the comments. Say, for example, you have a table in table form. In the first column, you will have the comments. And in the second column, you will indicate how you've made the corrections and where in the thesis it is. But you are also allowed, with the support of the supervisor, with the approval of the supervisor, because don't just as student decide that you're going to write a rebuttal and you don't agree with the examiner. I'm not going to change it because I don't agree with you. But there could be a comment like this, where the examiner says, but why did you not use these 5 sources? And then it's their own publications. It might be a case where you write a rebuttal where you say, but those 5 sources were not relevant to your study, and therefore those were not considered in your literature review, for example. So it does not mean you must change everything that the examiners say. There might be instances where you could write a rebuttal. If examiners, for example, ask about the limitations of the study, don't think that this means that there's something wrong with your study. Your study will have limitations, and explain those limitations, but also explain how those limitations were overcome or were addressed to some extent, or how, whether it affected your findings or not, or what one could do in future to prevent those kind of limitations. And also make sure that you know what your major achievements are of your research, because you've done a good job. You've worked hard for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Highlight those achievements that you've reached. These are just a couple of questions. What have been the high and low points of the research and writing process? Will you be able to answer that? What would you have done differently in the research process? Again, there's nothing wrong with indicating that if I could do a further research, I would focus on say, for example, quantitative data instead of qualitative data. So it does not mean that there was something wrong with your design, but what could you have done, or would you do differently if you do another study? What is the most important thing that you learned? What was your greatest challenge and how did you overcome it? What was your greatest aha moment during the research? Did you consider any other theoretical frameworks or maybe designs other than what you ended up selecting? Be able to answer those kind of questions. If you've used a specific theoretical framework or specific model in your study, make sure that you are able to explain why you used it, but also maybe if they ask you, but why didn't you use the other model, that you are able to answer that question by either saying, yes, it could have been applicable, or no, it was not applicable for this or that reason. And then they would also want to see the alignment between your reasoning around this whole study and also the methods that you've used in your study. So when you submit your final thesis, there must be a confirmation from the supervisor that you've engaged in all the corrections. And you will have that table with corrections. Some people write a narrative, but I find a table with corrections very helpful because it's clear what the comment was and then what the corrections were. You have to submit the final thesis, the final Turnitin report after all the corrections have been made. The ethical clearance certificate must be added, and then the proof of the language editing, if it's applicable in your field, then that must also be submitted. There is an appeals process, so a student might feel that there were unfair practices. It could have been during the supervision phase, it could have been during the examination phase. In the oral examination, there might be an examiner who becomes, I don't want to say aggressive, but maybe a bit harsh, and if it's a serious unfair practice, then the student may appeal, but please discuss it with your supervisor first, and then also have the appeal in writing. It will then go to the college, to the executive dean or a nominee of the executive dean, and from there it will go be discussed whether the reason for the appeal is explicit, whether it is a valid and justifiable appeal, and then should they find it to be valid, then it will go to the level of the College of Graduate Studies, and then also to the Vice Principal Research. So, and it will go to the Senate, which is the academic body. Just note that if there is an appeal and they appoint a new examiner, the decision of the new examiner will be the final decision. So students not only appeal when they fail and they feel they were unfairly treated. Some students appeal because they maybe in a master's got 72 or 73 or 74% and not a distinction. They might decide to appeal. But if that examiner, the final examiner, gives a mark of 65, then the student will get 65 and not the original mark of 73. So please remember that that decision is the final decision. Okay, I've rushed through the last chapter, the last slides, because I want to give Ms. Swanepoel also some time to present her slides and her discussion, which is very important. So just want to check, are there any questions before we change over?
Yes, thank you, Gisela. There was an anonymous said, I have a supervisor and a co-supervisor, and only the co-supervisor reviewed my work, who's a novice. Should one get worried? And I said, no, not at all. The co-supervisor is mentored by a main supervisor, and they have an agreement that governs their roles. So please don't stress about that. There is internal processes in place. And then anonymous says, is one allowed to make notes of questions during the Q&A? For sure. But note that the examiners know you're going to be a bit stressed. Take a deep breath. Make notes of the questions, because when you're stressed, you tend to forget, and then what was the question again? So yes, you can make notes of the questions and take them one by one, depending on what and how they do. And then Biri said, there is a need to work on it in order to avoid the rejection of a thesis before the stage. And I agree with that. And it's important that the supervisor and the student work together and make sure that they do everything. But I think Prof. Gisela clearly indicated that there are different ways that things are being looked at, and there is an appeals process if it's necessary to use that. Then there is a viva voce at proposal level or the final thesis defense. It's the final thesis defense. And then Gisela, this one, I think I'm going to ask you to answer. The anonymous asks, can I use Grammarly on my thesis?
Yes, you can use Grammarly. Grammarly will improve your English. It is different to ChatGPT that will where you can write a prompt and you say, give me a discussion on trustworthiness in qualitative research, and then they will give you a whole discussion on the criteria of trustworthiness and what it entails and how you can apply it to your study. So if you use Grammarly to assist you in terms of rephrasing some sentences or correcting your spelling or correcting your tenses, you can use that, but always use any AI or any support, any editor. Word also has the editor function. Use that responsibly. And someone asked me, but how do we define responsibly? It is about your scientific integrity. You are the student, you are the researcher. You have to write this thesis. You have to create the new knowledge. So Grammarly will assist you in your tenses or in your spelling. So you will do that responsibly, because you also use an editor, or in many cases students use a professional editor to edit their language. So that is also a function similar to Grammarly, for example, where the editor improves your spelling or your tenses, or paraphrase some of the sentences that are not clear. So it's about your scientific integrity as a researcher and using the support or the resources responsibly.
Thank you, Prof. Gisela. And then somebody asked, how does one qualify to become a supervisor at UNISA? To supervise a master's students, you must have at least a master's degree and then the compulsory training. With a doctorate, the supervisor must have a doctorate. To do that, also attend compulsory training. And at UNISA, as I've mentioned before, while they are a novice, it means that they have not assisted the student to completion of a qualification, then they are seen as novice supervisors. And yes, once you complete your doctorate and you will be interested to become a supervisor, you can in that college contact the relevant college representative. It would be the graduate office, and submit a CV to them, and then they can consider that as an external, but it's not a given that if you have a doctorate, we will appoint you. Then just quickly, one more to say, give examples of AI that may not be used. I think it's important to know that Turnitin is the official I don't want to call it plagiarism test. There's actually a different similarity index. So they check all AI platforms. It's not that if you use this one, it's not going to be detected. As Prof. Gisela said, it's about integrity, making sure that you use your own words as far as that is possible. I think that's important. Then there's a new one, is the AI spin bolt. I have no idea. I don't know if you know it, Gisela. Is the AI spin bolt? I don't know it at all. I assume that is also an AI platform. Then how will I know if I'm a candidate for a viva? Because registrations happen or extended period over the years. When will I find this? Where will I find the information? I will also give that information in my presentations. And I think important part is that once you submit for examination, then the NEC, as Prof. Gisela indicate, the NEC will contact you and make arrangements for that viva. Does the question is refill? No, you don't have to redo an oral exam after submitting the correction. If there was a few corrections that were asked for you to be done after the oral exam, you will just do it. If your supervisor is happy with those corrections, you will not have to redo the oral exam. Can I request for more time? In instance I'm unable to submit the corrections within the stipulated time, I will also address that. But for sure, Keribone, you can, if you need extra time, you will see in the procedures for masters and doctors, we do make provision for you to request for additional time. Then Oh, somebody asked, how many corrections take place after the viva voce? Is the board exam jury is dissatisfied with the first 4 months of corrections? Will they extend the period for a second or third time? That corrections will be approved by your supervisor. And I'm going to tell you where to find that information. Is there a mark allocated for a PhD? No. You either pass or you fail. Should I be worried as a PhD student to have only one supervisor? Not at all. If there's a sole supervisor, it means that that person is an expert, no longer a novice, and we have full that they can definitely do it on their own. Is the use of paraphrasing tools like Quillbot unethical? You would see earlier I've mentioned in one of my answers is that UNISA is currently busy almost in the final stages of an AI policy. Please, once that is available, I will also ensure that on the Facebook page it is advertised as well as on my UNISA. And do UNISA offer distinctions in PhD? And the answer is also no, because there's no mark. As I've said, you only pass or you fail. Okay. There's still 2 more, Gisela. How will I know if I'm a candidate? Oh no, that one I've answered. This is my suggestion that please tell to the concerned bodies to follow the responsiveness of the UNISA supervisors. Some supervisors of UNISA take a month or more than a month to respond to inquiries. Billy, I think the important part is that students don't always understand that a supervisor can have 5, 6, 7. I know there are some supervisors that have 27 master students as an example. So that is why the supervisor and student agreement is so important. And I hope if you haven't done it yet, I'll show you now on the website where to find it. You complete it, you arrange a meeting with your supervisor and you agree on a time frame. If your supervisor and you agree that he will take a month to respond, then you know it will take a month and you're going to be calm and you'll know it will come. But if they tell you, I'm going to give you feedback in a week, and that was the agreement, and now they take a month, then you need to take that matter up with them. But please, yeah, I think that's important, Billy, and I think it's for everybody. There must be a supervisor agreement between the student and the supervisor so that you also know exactly what needs to happen. Luckily, I have only a few slides that I want to share with you. And Gisela, do you want to continue?
Yes, while you upload, I also would just like to add to some of the comments. The first one was about the external supervisors. We receive quite a number of requests from supervisors or from PhD graduates who have also undergone the training, the supervision training at UNISA to now become external supervisors. Now, for you to become an external supervisor, there must be a reason why the university appoints you, because the university has internal staff. So they will appoint you or external supervisors if there's a lack of capacity for supervisors or a lack of expertise in that particular field. They will not do that for your for your sake of capacity building or building your academic career or your CV, improving your CV, there will be a specific reason, because you will understand that there are finances involved because external supervisors are paid. So if we appoint an external supervisor, it can be because of their expertise in a specific field, and there might not be expertise in the department. But then also we look at the fact that you have completed a PhD and completed the supervision training will not qualify you to be a supervisor of a student. We also look at your publication record. We look at your research record. We look at your record of having examined students at any institution. We do find PhD students who examine masters because they are experienced in research, or they might be lecturers at other universities, so they might have a record of that, or they have a record of having supervised students at another institution, or they were a PI of a funded research project in their work environment before they conducted or started with their PhD. So there are other criteria that we also must adhere to, but like Elena has said, communicate with the college, communicate with the departments where you fall, where you reside. So we have recruited external supervisors from our pool of graduates and those who have completed the training. Then someone asked whether they will know whether they have to do an oral examination. Yes, when you submit your intent to submit, when you receive your link, I think it will indicate it there as well. But your supervisor, when they complete the V35, that's the form where we appoint the examiners there, it will clearly be on that form. So your supervisor will be aware of that. So if you are not certain, please talk to your supervisor. Don't let it come as a surprise a month before you submit for examination or after you've submitted for examination. That will stress you out tremendously. So check with your supervisor if you are one of the cohorts that must do the oral. There is no supplementary or a re-examination in the oral at all. If you have a supervisor and a co-supervisor, it's not always the only reason is not always that it is a novice supervisor that must be mentored. Sometimes the supervisor is a content specialist and the co-supervisor is a process specialist. You might, for example, decide to do appreciative inquiry, and your supervisor, who's an expert in the specific field, has never conducted any research or engaged in research using appreciative inquiry. They might get a co-supervisor to so that they can give you the best support that they can. Supervisors and co-supervisors are really trained in the relationship between not only supervisor and student, but also the relationship between supervisor and co-supervisor, and especially the communication between supervisor and co-supervisor, the line of communication. Someone asked the question, is it okay if only the co-supervisor responds? The supervisor and co-supervisor behind the scenes discuss the study, and behind the scenes agree on the feedback that must go to you as student. They will never give you feedback from two different mouths. The one says yes for this and the other one says no. They will always fight it out if need be, but agree on what they are going to send to you as students, so that you only get one message from both the supervisors. If that is not the case, please remember there are processes that if you are not successful in discussing it with your supervisor, then your next step will be the M&D coordinator in the department and the chair of department, and then one can go to the college level. But please always start in the department. Sometimes students think if they write to the executive dean or to the research manager, it will have a better impact. It can often delay the process because, it might fall down the line of communication, and then they have to refer it back to the department, and then the department must find the suitable person, and then they must attend to it. So to get timely response to your concerns, please start in your department, and every department has an M&D coordinator, and that is your first point of contact if there are any issues related to your M&D studies, any questions you have that your supervisor cannot answer, or any questions that you have if your supervisor is maybe absent for certain reasons. You can communicate with the M&D coordinator. In terms of the response rate, there are also different reasons why response rates may differ. So it might be examination time, and the supervisor might be busy marking undergraduate exam scripts and will take longer to respond. But what is important, if you submit your work to your supervisor, one expects of the supervisor to respond to you within, say, 48 hours, but please don't count the weekends, because some students send an email on a Friday night and then they are upset because the supervisor by Monday morning, 8 o'clock, has not responded. But 48 hours in the working hours space, your supervisor should acknowledge your email. And what is good practice is that your supervisor might say to you, I will not be able to respond within 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month for whatever reason. It might be holiday or whatever the reason is, but they can give you something to do while you are waiting for the response. So they might say to you, while you are waiting for my feedback, please revisit your literature review and update your sources, or work on your reference list, or work on your methodology. I always say to my students, there is something very big wrong if they say to me that they have nothing to do while they wait for feedback from my side. You always have something to do related to your study while you wait for your supervisor to give you feedback. Towards the end, when you wait for the final feedback, it takes time to read a full thesis, and sometimes a supervisor will read it more than once. So it might take quite some time to finalize the feedback, for example, towards the end. Then you can work on your publications. You can start conceptualizing the articles that you have to write. I think there is a separate session where you will discuss the publication of the articles, but that is something that you can work on while you wait, either for the final feedback from the supervisor or the feedback from the examiners, those 6 weeks or 8 weeks that you will wait for the results. You can work on your articles, for example. So there is always something that you have to do, and discuss the response rate, because it will differ. Even if the contract says the supervisor will give feedback within 2 weeks, I'm telling you, it becomes quite difficult to stick to those 2 weeks, for example, because there are different circumstances. The supervisor might be on leave, on sick leave, marking exams, busy with 5 other students who are submitting for examination, then they have to prioritize, or they work on a first come, first serve basis. So as long as you and your supervisor have an open communication channel, that is very important, because it will also minimize the stress that you as a candidate have. Yeah, that's a mouthful. I think I'm going to pause there and hand over to, I see there are more questions, but I will attend to that. I will allow Mrs. Swanepoel to first do her presentation. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Gisela. I will really do my best to finish off before 8 o'clock. I'm specifically going to talk about what happens in the M&D examination research division of postgrad administration when that result comes from the NEC. The section is called M&D research examination section. Once they receive your result, the first thing they will check whether you are registered for the year. They will check whether you have any blocks on your student record. Do you have outstanding library books or a library fine, or do you have outstanding fees? Unfortunately, if there's any block on your student record, then they cannot capture your result and it will delay your process. So please make sure beforehand that you don't have any issues around the library, that you don't have outstanding fees. Make sure that all of that is sorted before you even submit for examination. It's just the best way to do it. The section checks that all the reports, the documents have been received. They verify signatures. As Prof. Gisela indicated, it's not just the case that the supervisor or the NEC goes, yes, this is a pass. There's a whole lot of approvals that happen to make sure that you receive a fair process. This section also reads through all the reports. They check whether there's any recommendations with regard that your title should change. They ensure that there's approval for that amendment, because it doesn't mean that if an examiner indicate that your title should change, whether that must happen. It will be a discussion between the NEC and the supervisor. So there's a lot of work that goes into this to ensure that they can start their process to capture your result, prepare your letters. You will also, once they prepare the letter to say your result is now out, they will also do an official statement. And I'm working on the scenario. I'm not focusing on a 1.5, not even on a 1.4. I'm saying you are going to pass. You are going to do your best. You are going to do your thing. And once that result comes out, you will receive it. You will receive an official statement that you've completed. We also inform the NEC, the executive dean, the chair of the department, and we inform the supervisor that your result is now out. And then they inform the graduation department. Obviously, and again, I'm looking at the best case scenario that it's a pass. Obviously, if it's not the case and there is a resubmit or you fail, then that communication will also be there. Graduations will receive your record card. They will only finalize your record once they have approved graduation dates. We have 2 graduation periods, which is in autumn, the other one spring. They will change your record from a final year student to a completed student once they can allocate you to a graduation date. We've seen many times that students say, but I'm still show on the record, I'm a final year, I haven't completed my studies. It is that gap between where your record card is at graduations and they are waiting for those dates to be approved. Once they allocate you to a graduation date, then your record will show that you've completed. If you see on the system that there's a PC, which means partial complete, it means that there are either documents outstanding or your finances are not in order. There's some or other block that causes this, that happened after the record card has been given, your result has been captured. Then after the graduation ceremony, you may call yourself Dr. So-and-so. Before that graduation ceremony and you have not walked the stage, you are not allowed to use the term that you are a doctor. You're only allowed to do that once you have gone to the graduation ceremony. Important here as well, if you need help, and before you even start sending an email, go to the procedures for master's and doctoral degrees. Make sure that you know what's in that procedures. It governs the whole examination process. It governs the guidelines for the Viva Voce. The section can be emailed at any time to resexquote@unisa.ac.za. If you feel stressed and you feel, but now I've been waiting too long for my result, you are welcome to send them an email. They will make a follow-up. They will check where what the status is of your record. So there's really a few basic things that you just need to know. We just want you to make you aware of all the processes that need to happen before you actually become Dr. So-and-so. And I am at the end, but I do want to quickly just go out and I want to show you on the UNISA website, and I hope you can now see my screen, and I'm sorry it's extremely small, but I'll try my best. If you go to the Masters and Doctoral website, you will see here on the left-hand side, it says policy, procedures and forms. And here you will find the procedures for master's and doctoral degrees. You will find quite a lot, research ethics, all of these are things, and there's a policy for copyright infringement and plagiarism. These are things that you need to be aware of, and you will also find the standard operating procedure for the doctoral examination. It's important, go to the document, print it out, have it available, consult it, and make sure that you feel comfortable by the time that the Viva is being held, that you feel confident that you know exactly where you are going to be and what you are going to do and what you must prepare for. I think that is the important part of it. Thank you so much. If there's any questions, you're welcome to post it. We will answer them. Thank you so much. Thank you. Over to you, Gisela.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that we have hopefully clarified all the issues, but there are more sessions on. There's another session, I think, next week on the examination. So if there are any questions, please make a note. We will attend to those questions because they will also, the discussion will also be on examination and how to deal with the feedback. There were 2 questions which I was able to answer. It was just about the publications. And maybe, Eleanor, you can also just explain the requirement of the 2 manuscripts, that they have to be submitted. There must be proof that they were submitted before the exam results will be released. And it's only relevant to PhD students, not to master students anymore.
Yeah, the students where they have to prepare the 2 manuscripts are the students that started with their doctoral studies in 2020. So if you registered for the first time before 2020, you do not have to do the manuscripts, but I must tell you, I would recommend that you do it anyway for yourself. Publishing is wonderful. But then for those that must do the 2 manuscripts, we only need the proof that you've submitted it to an accredited journal. It doesn't have to be accepted yet, because that can take sometimes a year or 2. That's why it's still called a manuscript and not a publication or an article. So it's just proof that you have submitted it to an accredited journal. Thank you, Gisela.
Thank you. And just to mention that the list of accredited journals, you can ask your supervisor for that list, but you can also go to the website of the Department of Higher Education and Training, and you will find the list of accredited journals. So please look at the list of accredited journals. We will talk about the publications, or whoever presents the session will talk about the page fees and all those requirements. But please just note that you may never submit a manuscript to a journal without the approval of your supervisor. Your supervisor will be a co-author. You will be the first author. and the supervisor or supervisors will be the co-authors. There are supervisors that say, no, you can publish as a sole author, but then the supervisor must still approve the manuscript before you can submit it to the journal. Your affiliation will also be UNISA. It will not be the Department of Health in Ethiopia. If you are an Ethiopian student, it will be your affiliation as a UNISA student that you will publish those 2 articles. Okay, that was just a quick comment on the manuscripts. I would like to thank you for your attention and for all the many questions that you asked, because these questions challenge us all, and it also shows what the real issues our students grapple with. So thank you very much for your participation, and have a good evening. And thank you, Ms. Swanepoel, for your attention, and Ms. Dube and Ms. Senge, thank you very much for your support as well. In this session.
Thank you so much, Prof. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Please stay warm. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Prof. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.